Welcome to another episode, ladies and gentlemen, of Primetime Live here on Jess FM. Given the content we are going to because we want to reach a wide audience that we're talking about the Tumblr rate on the very extended to not but the entire community of Tumblr. This is a small community north of Prince George, British Columbia, where one gun person opened fire after people in a residence and or including himself and after there was 27 in the entire community of Tumblr Ridge has been shocked to their core given the violence that is in the community. They're mostly that the response to the 2 minutes initial call. There are different protocols from North America and worldwide to respond to shooter situation. In this case, the protocols have been first on scene immediately upon arrival for an ERT the shooter is a very 18 years old and their own life well, and it is unknown the timeline as to when that happened. But given that the very quick five of us to the school and survive this, it was likely that there would be approaching vehicles or the Now, this is a very sad state, a very touchy subject for many people, and it's very tough for a lot of parents and students alike not in trouble with it. It goes to a security people. Pause for a moment. Like to allow for this here. There we go, Jesse. Is that any better on your end? If you can just give me a thumbs up with that text. Test 1, 2. Do that adjust audio, Jesse? Or if I just do just audio. Test 1, 2. And I'm just going to stop this and switch mics and see if that helps, if that's the case. Oh, that's a lot better. Okay, perfect. Then we'll continue on. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my apologies. I'm setting up some different audio using some different mics that are here. My apologies for a slight technical difficulty there. Hopefully this is better. But let's get back to what we were discussing. Of course, that is the horrific events that happened in Tumblr Ridge, British Columbia. And let's take you to a screen here where we'll just kind of take a look at some of the victims. I mean, it is heartbreaking to see these parents have lost their children. They have, just the innocence of this community has been lost. And there are still students that are fighting for their life or trying to recover from it. It's just, again, horrific event to see happen. I mean, here's a 12-year-old young girl in, the exciting time of her life. She's, approaching high school and excited about what the future may hold, and that was just taken away from her and her family, her friends, and the community in just moments that it took for that attack to happen. And I mean, you can see some of the images on the screen here of these children who were just going about their normal day at school. And it's horrifying. It's heartbreaking to see what has happened. And there's another one of victims. It's just, you look at the images and you picture your own children, and it just breaks your heart to know that this has happened. And we know that mental health plays a lot of a main contributor to a lot of these attacks that we see in school shootings and mass attacks. And we'll get into that a bit later in the show. But I thank you to Global TV and Global News. Those images there that you see on your screen were from their report. And again, there were 8 people found deceased in the school that were killed, and 2 in a residence who were killed prior to the attack at the school. So again, just horrific. We thought that tonight, as we bring about the show, we are going to look here again. I hope you can echo on the mic. We just our top mic here, and let's see if we can do this here. Our screen. There we go. Try that and see how that works for us tonight, and then we'll have it all sorted for the next show. I'll kind of sit to the side here so that I'm not having a mic right over my face. But you can actually so there we go, folks. Let's continue on. And as I said, tonight is a show that we wanted to look at different ways in which school shootings can be identified beforehand, the threats, and also understand a bit about the cause and effect of school shootings, and how people can take steps to educate themselves, be a bit more aware of what we call leakage and what we refer to are the precipitating factors that lead to these events in many cases. Now, we are going to do a site and violence. That's www.handviolence.com. So that's youthhandviolence.com. We're going to visit that site through the beginning here so that we can pull up some resources for you. And again, you're welcome to check out that website as well. As I said, a lot of the factors that we see in hindsight after school shootings, we recognize a lot of the warning signs, a lot of the indicators that, had people been aware of them beforehand, then it could have led to intervention and prevention as opposed to the reaction of such horror. Now, this website was launched back in the 1990s, and it had been responsible for preventing several school shootings, including one where a student had a hit list and a weapon. And through people reaching out to the website, they were able to intervene before the student was able to act. So again, a very valuable resource. that's available for everybody to check out and educate themselves further on violence. So with that, as I said, there's a lot of mental health issues that play into whether it is bullying, acts of violence or aggression, and of course, ultimately, in these types of school attacks. And that is something that needs to be dealt with. We're going to actually jump to jump to the site now. And pop that onto the screen for you so you can do it as well. And we'll take a look at another site as well at one point. Show it will. Now, of course, we know, as I said, there is a lot of information out there, but one of the things that prevents that parents from understanding and teachers and students alike is the denial factor. The fact that people think it's not happening here, it won't happen in my school, it won't happen in my student's school or my children's school. And that is where, when we take the steps to educate ourselves, though we are accepting that it could potentially happen, that is a scary thing for parents to come to that realization. And that a lot of them actually actively do something, finding information about youth and this is something that people need to understand, that it is about trying to prevent these actions. In most school shootings, actually over 80% of them, there was what was called, and that is where the student has made claims, whether it's online or to peers or others, that they are actually considering such an act of violence, in whether it's a school or against an individual. And that is where the tools to understand, to listen, and to really identify those risks as being real. Of course, there are threats made by people all the time. Those are just the threats that are idle, that aren't meant to be acted upon. However, there is the next step where those become actionable threats, and that's where they are going through stages of ideation, planning, of preparing, of different things throughout the process, and that is where ultimate opportunity for intervention lays. And that is an important step. So again, something important to realize. As we take a look here, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look first at some of the resources that are on the site. Of course, there's the record blogs, and we have a lot of different information here. And we'll start with the communicated threat here. And this is, again, warning signs of behaviors, and that is the cultural narrative that surrounds mass shootings and targeted violence, that it relies on the trope of the perpetrator who snaps. And that is generally not the case. They don't just suddenly snap out of the blue. It is something that takes time, and it starts going up because the perception of it being an impulsive adventure is, looking at it in a wrong light. Now, even after decades of rigorous research conducted by the FBI, the Secret Service, the National Threat Assessment Centers, academic bodies, including the Violence Project, Alfred University, and youth violence, the data consistently demonstrates that targeted violence is the accumulation of the effectual pathway of behavior characterized by planning, preparation, and most critically, the communication of intent to third parties. And that's, as I said, what we call the phenomenon of leakage. And that is very important. So that is something that people need to be aware of and start acting on. And then there's the statistical frequency of that. As I said, up to 80% of school shootings, there is leakage. When it comes to outside of schools in mass attacks, and whether that is such as the events that took place at the Philippine Festival in Vancouver and other events, it's usually about 59% of those cases have leakage that people didn't identify because they didn't have the understanding of it. And so again, it is really, really tough. And when I say the school shooters, aged 17 and younger, again, the rates are about 80%, and some indicate up to 88% of the. So again, very important. When you look at the demographic variances, the research identified significant correlations between the likelihood of leakage and factors such as age, race, and gender, but at the same time, the numbers are there that show that it is a matter of listening. Because a lot of times that leakage is the cry for help. They want somebody to intervene to help them. They are screaming in a way that is the only way they know how to try to ask for help, and that is through these idle threats that then become active threats. And at that point, the person may not have the internal tools to know how to cope or to reach out for help by speaking their actual frustration. They may not understand what it is that they're going through internally, and they may also feel so isolated that they don't have that trust built to be able to speak to individuals, whether that's a guidance counselor, teacher, school safety officer. They may not have the ability at home to speak with parents or siblings to try and get some guidance and get some help. And that's where it plays a very dangerous when they feel that they are not understood and that there's nobody there that is going to help them without being judgmental, then that, of course, takes them to internalize a lot more of that emotion, of that fear, of that anger, of that anxiety. And, it just multiplies from there. And it is a very crushing pressure. And that is where we end up. Now, of course, we also need to look at the causes and effects. Now, whether or not the student is acting out in general or if they are targeting a certain group of individuals, there is a cause and effect, and there are different reasons for it. Again, if a student is suffering abuse at home or maybe bullying and violence perpetrated at school, then they could be acting out in that regard. The issue is that when some students or some individuals are being picked on at school, when they're being picked on at home, when they feel that they have lost all that sense of control, then they are looking for a way to regain control, or at least that sense of control over others. And sometimes that manifests into violent outbursts. Sometimes they become the bully themselves because that is how they feel that they have regained any type of sense of power and control over their own life. And it gives them a sense that they are regaining power over others that they've lost, whether that's through home or elsewhere. And so again, important factor to look at. And when you look at this particular case in Tumbler Creek, you have an individual who was involved in separating the responsibility in the sense of almost a sense of responsibility to the parent, or at least the mother, in the fact that she had killed the mother and the other individual at home in the residence, and then went on to the school. And that again is not common in these types of attacks and these types of massacre events. And as sad as it is something that we see more often than people would like to really acknowledge or to accept. And that's really sad because it gives us a clear point of there being that opportunity to protect these individuals that we failed, and when we fail to protect them, then just scream out when they don't speak. And when we look at that, of course, we also have to consider the importance of gun safety. It's not about banning all weapons. I mean, a lot of times these are not legally obtained weapons, whether it's a maximum in the community or in the school. However, it is a lot of times reflected on the irresponsible ownership of these guns, whether the perpetrators have access to weapons, they're not being properly secured and locked, or they are being locked up, but that the individuals and they know the truth gun state. You know, you have to look at the totality of responsible gun ownership. And that means ensuring that they are locked up, that nobody else has access to the safe. Keep the guns and the fire pans and the ammunition in separate safes. But again, it's about limiting the opportunity and the access. And when you do that, then of course you are reducing the likelihood of not only somebody using them in a mass act of violence, but also when you look at accidental deaths and suicide, again, it was the access to the weapon. So if you can restrict that access, then you're not only reducing the likelihood of those weapons being stolen, those weapons being used in mass events, but also accidental or suicides. So again, it's so important to take responsibility of your weapons and your gun ownership. Very, very important. And, it's not about necessarily, as I said, it's not necessarily about banning weapons. It's not about taking the right to bear arms in the U.S. or people in Canada that have the right to have weapons. But it's about responsible ownership, responsible storage, and responsible use. Once again, very, very important. And if you start to understand warning signs and indicators of violence, then of course you can take those further steps should they be needed to restrict the access even further to or potential access to a weapon within the home environment, and very important to understand. Now, when we look at this, we look at it as a three-tier problem and or potential solution, as you may. You have the three tiers that are, of course, the home and family unit. Then you have the education and the spiritual components, so the teachers, the school environment, the church, the Gemara, the temple, whatever it may be. And then the third tier, of course, or otherwise known as the pillar, being the general community. So we've got extracurricular activities, that is organized sports, or just general community programs, rec centers, all of that sort of thing. So you have those three pillars or those three tiers that can come together to assist in the prevention and reduction of violence in communities, in schools, and elsewhere. So if you have a solidified and consistent message throughout, then it definitely helps to give that. One of the big things that we see today in geopolitical circles and just in online is a lot of hatred brewing out there. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of anger. And it's being perpetrated as high up as the President of the United States, creating division, anger, speaking out in hateful ways towards various groups and minorities. And again, this is creating an internal chaos within youth and children because they are being subjected to this when their entire life so far they've been taught that people are the same, that we need to treat each other as equals and with respect. And now even the most powerful person in the world, you could say, with Donald Trump, he is not doing that. And instead, he's created an entire atmosphere online and in real life that is targeting minorities and is taking away the equality of these groups. And that again causes internal chaos and self-doubt within these individuals. They've already been pre-positioned to violence, and that is really contributing to where our society is going, but also to the almost desensitization and acceptance of violence within the communities. When you see ICE agents on the streets beating people and arresting them for just looking different or being, outspoken, then that is not right. When you see people being suppressed because of what they believe or who they identify as, my powers of I, as the president of the United States and the administration, that doesn't just affect Americans. That affects everybody worldwide because the internet is not isolated to the United States. That whole machine and those algorithms are targeting people around the world and youth around the the world are getting the message. And that is a dangerous position that we put ourselves in today's society. When you look at the advocacy factor of that, you need to have voices that are clear, that stand up, that are not afraid of the threats of the Donald Trump out there and the bullies that are in power. Instead, we need advocates who can speak up to those who may not have a voice. And that's a part of what this episode is about, is speaking up and calling out a lot of the factors that are contributing to the chaos within the minds of our youth, our children, and adults alike. When you have people in power who are trying to divide because of your self-identification, because of your gender identification, because of any other differences, racial, economic, doesn't matter what it is. When you have people that are speaking in such hateful ways, threatening their opponents and others, then it begins to teach kids in youth that it's okay to act in such ways, but that their formation of mind may not put them on a barrier to stop between the speech and the actions. And that is, again, a very dangerous place. And even though, as I said, we may be seeing it a lot in the US, we're starting to see it in Japan, we're seeing it in the UK, we're seeing it in Canada, we're seeing it in a lot of different nations now, that there is division, hatred, just vile things being spoken, and it seems to be accepted, as well as the threats and the acts of violence that people are getting away with. And that is teaching others that it's okay to act out if you act in such violent ways. Now, again, we need the advocates out there to be able to get up and speak out and to really have their voices heard on behalf of those who are silent. And we need a media that can be relied upon to bring us truthful reporting and information when it comes to all of these different points. Instead, what we have is a certain portion of the media who are just into it, trying to chase the clicks and the likes and the shares because that is ad revenue. And there's also a point where a lot of the media saturation is coming, and the algorithms are really perpetrating and reproducing content that is of a negative way because it is what gets the viewers. We need to understand as well, there are a lot of media outlets, like I won't say all of them, there are a lot of media outlets that have turned either going to the far left or far right, and they're not centered on both sides with equal reporting and equal coverage for the truth. The reason why is because as there's become more and more media saturation out there, what has happened is that instead of targeting the audience with the truth, they're targeting the audience with what they want to hear, what aligns with their beliefs, and what's going to draw them in to view the content. And that is a backwards look at what the responsibility is of the media. Now, the media is supposed to be impartial. It's supposed to report the truth. It's supposed to educate. It's supposed to raise awareness. But instead, it's gotten to a point where it's almost all an entertainment type approach to use the media, where they are just chasing the viewer. You get them on there, and instead of reporting an unbiased view, they are taking corporate commands and threats. It's coming to threats by the White House to just give a very isolated and biased view of the stories that are covered. Again, very dangerous territory because a part of the job of the news media is to help to back up democracy, to hold people in power to account, to bring truth and education to people on the path, not on the summit. And that is again where we're at with the media. When we look at the media as well, a lot of people will blame video games, and they may blame music, they may blame online content. for violence. And yes, there may be some truth to that. But furthermore, what happens is that when you have a youth or a child or an individual, even an adult, that has a predisposition to violence, with a lack of the ability and tools to handle it, then that is where those factors will play into it. It is not necessarily the cause, but it may be a contributing factor to somebody who's already predisposition to that violence. So that is a big difference. And that's where parents of children and youth need to understand that they have to work within the system to monitor their children's online use, to make sure they're not being radicalized by the other powers that are online. Because let's face it, these are people that are radicalized children and youth that adults online. They have they hold questions with that. And if they are able to manipulate through the algorithm, through the however we do or not or concern. Again, it's very important. Now, this has been something that's happened offline for years when it comes to gang violence and gang installations and recruitment. These gangs knew that if they targeted children and youth who were more isolated, that were ostracized, that were picked on them, that were looking for a sense of belonging that every person had, and gave them that full sense of belonging and purpose within the gang structure, then that's how they recruited. And again, that's how a lot of the online radical groups are doing well. And they are doing so through chat rooms, video games, through regular chat rooms, through social media, through online videos. There's a lot of different new approaches that are being used. But again, the psychology behind the recruitment is still the same. When we look at that, we also have to consider the advent and the increased use of AI. And this is something that we covered not too long ago. And that was the ability of AI to try and almost befriend you. The AI algorithms, and there are programs out there now that are being utilized for therapeutic or psychological counseling. And unfortunately, the bots don't have the human ability to challenge different perceptions or different ideas. A lot of times, what's happening is that these AI systems are actually instead agreeing with or supporting or even encouraging such behavior. And in doing so, I hope I'm just going to check something there. And tiny on the screen, yes, we are looking at some other violence things, but again, I can go back to full screen. But yeah, I wanted to show the site and have that there. But again, we're not showing that. Go big or go home, as they say. There we go. We're back on full screen here. And again, so as I was saying, the AI algorithms, they don't necessarily have that objective challenge to the individual that's using them. And instead, what's happening is that AI algorithms are being supporting or even encouraging negative behaviors because it believes that that is what's going to keep the individual engaged with that application. Again, the longer they're engaged with the application, the longer they are, the more opportunity that that app has to make revenue. So we've seen this where an app actually encouraged and really supported an assassination attempt on the Queen. And, there's been many other cases where students or youth, I should say, have tried to get psychological help from AI apps where they were feeling suicidal or subjecting themselves to self-harm. And these AI apps actually encourage them to continue or to keep going. And that is scary when we look at the fact that youth are trusting in these AI apps and the technology that help them through these struggles. And instead, we have to be back and give them ways in which they can act out of their thoughts instead of challenging the thoughts and trying to get them more in-person or professional help through a regular or a certified counselor, and that is dangerous as well. When we look at the increase in AI, it's about ethics, it's about responsible use, it's about accountability. And unfortunately, a lot of the pathway that is being led by the United States and the major corporations in Silicon Valley, thanks to Donald Trump, a lot of the restrictions, regulations, and the rules that were being put together for the ethical responsibility of AI have been thrown out, and it's become a wild, wild west once again. And that again takes away the accountability of these AI companies when it comes to their involvement. So again, if you are a parent, a teacher, or even a student who notices a friend that may be relying on the therapeutic apps on ChatGPT or others, just be aware that they may be doing more harm than they are doing good. Again, they don't have the ability to challenge a lot of the thoughts. Instead, they encourage it, trying to keep the person engaged with the application. Now, as we look at that, of course, we know that that's not all of the brain, and we need to get to a point where, again, you have the information. We also need to look at the ability for communities, whether they're small rural communities such as the Tumbler Ridge or big city metropolis areas like Los Angeles or Toronto or Vancouver or London, England, anywhere you go. There seems to be a real gap between the need for mental health help and assistance and intervention versus the actual programs that are available. So the need is way exceeding the programs that are there to help, and that is real concern. We need to look at where the mental health supports have gone, where we can do better, and how we can improve on it. For those that are interested, there are now actual mental health first aid programs where you can learn about first aid and intervention for people in crisis. So I encourage you to look that up. I know for myself in the film and television industry, there are several different opportunities to take the mental health first aid course, whether that's through the EFC or through Access and others, but there are a lot of programs out there that can help you to take courses in mental health first aid and help you recognize people in crisis, whether that's a family member, an associate at work, or elsewhere. So again, I encourage you to really get involved, be empowered, get the tools to deal with mental health, but also to reach out to your MLAs, to your MPs, to your senators, to your congresspeople, and demand that more resources are put into helping people with mental health challenges. All too often these days, we actually see prisons and jails that are being utilized in order to house those who are actually in a crisis. Instead, we could have less money and less resources by actually having counseling and other crisis management programs in place before they were actually interacting with the legal justice system. So again, it's about a big gap between the need and the services that are being offered. And we can look back as far as Reagan when it comes to the U.S. Well, we don't need to pick them. It's just very easy for the U.S. to be a visual point for most people worldwide because the program does reach a wide audience. Now, when Ronald Reagan looked at trickle-down economics and he cut back on the healthcare facility, they in turn put a lot of the people who were in mental health facilities out of the streets and really skyrocketed the homeless issue. And that became not only a crisis when it came to homelessness and housing, but also when it came to the criminal justice system, the law enforcement, because they were dealing with all of these people that didn't have anywhere else to go, that didn't have the mental health supports and programs that they were relying on to help them through every day. They lost the ability of being self-sufficient through the different living assistance programs that were out there. So again, it really contributed over many decades, but it is again leading us to where we are today. When we continue to allow the age of division and the ugliness of politics to reach our youth and our children through not only the politicians themselves, but through the people who are a part of, whether it's MAGA or Proud Boys or anybody else, when they're seeing this content online, it is having a direct and immediate impact on the increase in violence in our communities today. You can listen to some people saying that violence is down, that crime is down, but at the end of the day, you also have to factor in that a lot of people not comfortable in reporting violence, whether that's in India, whether that's in Dubai, whether that is in China, or Canada, or the US, or the UK, or Brazil. They are feeling that that law enforcement and the facilities and agencies that are supposed to help them are failing. And when they feel that they're being failed, then of course they don't have the comfort and the security of the feeling safe to report. Therefore, a lot more violent acts are going unreported, and this is where it causes some of the problem. Because if they're unreported, of course, they're going to go into statistics. Statistics are gathered and used to help form funding decisions when it comes to local, state, provincial, and federal level governments. When you look at the UN, they've been very involved in global initiatives to help prevent violence, to really create the rights of the child, and so forth. But again, their funding has been stripped back. So again, all of these programs, from a global standpoint, right down to a community, and local, regional, provincial, and federal level, have really got that is again put into your practice. But again, it also comes to people empowering themselves with the tools and the knowledge to identify the warning signs and indicators before it becomes an act of violence. And again, the website that we've been referring to is End Youth Violence, www.youthandviolence.com. I encourage you to spend some time on there and really take a look. When we look at the problems of violence and mental health, of course, we know that there are problems out there. But another blockade to the mental health initiatives that are out there is the consistency, the funding, and the opportunity for the system. Now, one of the blockades, of course, is medication. Not only ensuring that people who are prescribed medication for mental health issues actually take the medication, but also the ability to afford medication. As we look at the current economic situation around the globe, is high cost increases, whether that's through inflation, housing, and all of these different pressure points that we're in, people are missing out on the medication because they simply cannot afford it in some areas. This is a dangerous factor because when someone is taking whether it's a depression medication that affects her or others, then when they are not taking medication, it causes that imbalance to happen. It creates an instability in the mind. It creates a chaos within the individual that is more likely to contribute to others self-harm or acts of violence against others. So if you do not create a program where they can have the reliable and continued access to mental health medications, then again, you are contributing to the problem that we are seeing. And that is a big issue because if you've never taken mental health medications, whether depression, anxiety, all these other things, you don't understand the impact that can have on your life. When someone, for example, starts to use a stressor or So for example, they bring the rate up. They don't just automatically start with the full dose. Bring it up and increase the body and allow the body to regulate and get used to that to help with whether it's the chemical or other imbalances in the brain or elsewhere. And what happens is that when that happens, one of the problems that people have is that they may feel nauseous, they may not feel right as the body adjusts to that medication. So therefore, they decide that, oh, it's going to be sick, I can this or that, and they don't continue the cycle long enough for it to have its full efficacy and for those side effects to be not as the body adjusts. So again, the same is said when people are coming off of the mental health medication, is that when they stop taking those medications because they can't afford them or whatever they are, then what happens is that there are physical and psychological impacts of that withdrawal, whether that is a sense of almost like an energy burst in the brain, where if you were a kid like me, everybody tried to put the battery on the tongue called shock. And that can be, that's what's described by some when they quit taking certain antidepressants and such without bringing down the doses. It's like taking a 9-volt battery and brain every once in a while that really causes that loss. So again, that can be very dangerous to be on the edge of self-harm or harming others. So if never really understood the dangers of moving down or off those medications, it's very important to understand that there's that cycle of introduction where it has to be reduced over a week or two, the body will adjust to that being there, the system will help to regulate, and you'll get to a balanced range of moods or actions. And then again, the same if you're coming off medications, the doctors will dosages to gradual and the dosages immediate stopping because it can gargle very dangerous withdrawal symptoms and so I hope that this has explained some of the background of contributing factors of violence and also mental health. I hope that people have thought this valuable share this with others and also visit the site www.youthandviolence.com. Now, of course, we can't end the show without talking about substance abuse and whether that is alcohol or whether that is drugs, narcotics, whether that is self-medicating with other prescribed medications or through high-risk behaviors. Maybe it's someone who likes to get out on a motorcycle and do 200 kilometers an hour and get that adrenaline rush. That is an addiction as well that you're using to push other things out of your mind that you don't want to deal with, their chaos, the craziness that you may identify within. Or maybe it's high risk behaviors that actually leaving it to fate on whether or not it's going to harm you. And by that you can have crack on a motorcycle, but you might motorcycles and yourself or your own behavior. Again, it's about looking at what you're doing to cope with those internal processes, internal issues that are going on. And I will actually play a song for you that I just wrote in the last few weeks, and it uses the metaphor of a weapon, and that representing the internal struggles that people have. Everybody has internal struggles, but again, they could be mental health, it could be emotions that you're not familiar with, due to certain trauma. It could be a lot of different things. It could be how you're coping with ADHD. It could be how you're coping with depression and anxiety. So again, everybody has that internal chaos that is there, whether it is consistent or whether occasionally it still happens. And how we deal with that, look at that part, it is the metaphor that. And then, of course, with the bullets comes how you deal with it. In the song, the metaphor there plays out bullets represent the different coping mechanisms, whether that's self-medication, through narcotics, through alcohol, through higher behaviors, through eating, through spending, through so many different ways in which all different people deal with that inner chaos. And that's important to understand is that we all deal with inner chaos differently. And that is why in the song, the line bullets in Cousineau is because we each have our own weapon internally and we load it with our own ammunition, as they said, conviction or action or otherwise. I thought I'd just play the song for you before we take a look at mental health in terms of addiction issues. Do that next, and then we'll talk about the different issues that play into mental health and the actions by individuals and do that. If you want a copy of this song, there's actually 3 versions of it. Download it. You can get it on the website. Download the tracks.
Maybe a pack, maybe a bar. I'll be there, pedal, I push full throttle. Same old gun, good bullets, same.
Sorry, folks. Seem to have bad.
This ain't no restartable game. My chamber's empty. It's driving me. Maybe a pack, maybe a bar. I'll be that pedal I push full throttle. Same old gun, good the bullets ain't the same. This ain't no restartable game. My chamber's empty, it's driving me insane. Everything to lose, nothing to gain. 'Cause I'm locked and loaded, I lost my way. I try to keep fighting, but I can't beat the pain. The people around me, Lord, how they cry. They're the ones hurting. Now that I've died, they beg and they pleaded. Their hope corroded, all 'cause I was live and I was noted. Saw the warnings, but I looked away. Said I'm fine when I wasn't okay. Every sunrise just burned like rain, drowning my soul in a flood of shame. They said, slow down, but I hit the gas, living too wild, too fast to last. 'Cause I'm locked and loaded, I've lost my way, try to keep fighting, but I just fade away. The people around me, Lord, how they cry. They're the ones hurting. Now that I've died, they begged and they pleaded. Their hope corroded, all 'cause I was lost and I was molded. There's a light in the distance, I see it now. Wish I could go back, make my mama proud. If I can tell the ones I left behind, don't fear the fire that burns your mind. I was locked and loaded, too far gone, fighting a war I could never have won. If you hear my story, take it to heart. Lay down your weapon before 'cause I was right and I was loaded. Same old gun, but the bullets ain't the same. You only lose once in a one life game.
So again, it just is representative of the struggles of the internal chaos that people go through. And that's an important thing to keep in mind, because when people are dealing with mental health crisis and they can't afford medication, or they don't reach out for help because they don't feel safe, or that there is a place for them to get help and they feel like they are the only one going through the things that are happening, then of course they turn, in a lot of cases, to avoidance, to self medication, or other self destructive behaviors that help them to suppress those feelings of inadequacy, to suppress those feelings of anger, of anguish, of being a failure, and so many different things that people feel. And when they're isolated, then again, their voice is not being heard, or they aren't able to use that voice because they don't know how to communicate what it is that they're feeling. A lot of times that will contribute to different types of risky behavior. And unfortunately, drinking is a long known pattern of behavior to avoid feeling, to avoid trauma, to avoid the emotional disconnect that's going on internally. So again, alcohol, whether that's binge drinking, or just functional alcoholics, or so forth. So there's a lot of different levels to that as well. And if people don't feel like they can get help, then that's going to make the problem worse, or they're going to turn to other things. When the alcohol is not working, they're going to turn to other things that maybe will help to suppress those issues further. The same thing with marijuana and heroin and meth and coke, and I can go on and on and on about the risks that are out there, and especially when it comes to youth. Now, if parents have medication themselves that are in cupboards in the medicine chest, then of course one of the big problems that we're seeing these days is youth taking those medications, and they actually have pill parties where they'll get together with a group of friends. They'll just basically pool all the pills that they've gathered from their parents or from others, and then they just start taking pills. They don't even know what half of them are, and what the impacts are, and leads to overdoses or addiction issues. So again, very dangerous out there, and it's important to pay attention to the warning signs and indicators. Once more, I'd like to refer you to the website www.youthandviolence.com for resources to help with all of these different areas of concern. Whether that is through addiction issues, whether it is violence issues, whether it's depression, bullying, anxiety, all of those different things. So again, get the resources, get empowered, get educated so that you can help others, or maybe yourself, because the life you save could be your own, or someone that you deeply care about. Once again, you've been watching Primetime Live here on Jess TV and Jess FM. I thank you for taking the time to watch this important episode. And again, if you have any comments, please feel free to share them with us. And you can leave those in the comment section or email us directly, and we will respond accordingly. Once again, this is Primetime Live on Jess FM and Jess TV. I'm James Cousineau, coming to you from the studios here, and invite you to come back next Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Take care. Stay safe.